Nights of the Hunt 3. Caddock spotted Constance walking up from the stair into the second floor of the church workshop. He himself was seated in the corner, arms crossed and leaning back in his chair. He had anticipated she would arrive, and he continued to watch her as she continued up to the third floor. She spotted him looking and gave him an upward nod. Caddock nodded back. Passing her in the stair came two other hunters talking. When they saw him, they swiftly approached.
Heading out, Caddock. Care to join?
You out hunting?
Of course. Want to be out in good time before it gets dark.
I get that.
Hunting alone again?
Yeah, think I will. The two of them nodded. One started to button up his collar over his mouth, accustomed that he sometimes insisted on hunting alone.
Alright. We'll be around Riverrun Park if you change your mind.
Eyes at your back makes the beast harder to sneak up on ya, eh, Caddock?
He smirked and nodded in agreement.
Don't I know it? But a second pair of eyes makes me paranoid.
Don't speak harshly of yourself now.
Sometimes I just prefer to play it slow, at my own pace. When the prey is extra fickle, you know.
They seemed to understand from experience and raised their hands to bid him goodbye, then walked down to the first floor. It did not take long for Constance to return, now more quickly walking down the steps.
Hey, Constance.
The woman stopped, dressed in full hunting attire, ready for the night like many others.
Where to?
Huh? Over to, past Lord's Path.
All the way to Alma Gardens.
She smiled jokingly, still turned away and ready to leave.
Yeah, got all my marks there tonight.
Okay, not me though. Stay safe out there, alright?
She nodded and hurried away. He sighed before standing up. He was aware that some of her marks had not been checked properly. 2 times she had given faulty reports, as incidents in those places had later occurred. To the common hunter, it was the stress of the hunt, a sloppy mind that simply deserved a slap on the wrist from the captain. And sometimes it was. But then it always stopped, or at least changed in some way. With others, it stood out as plain negligence, and few hunters could be described as negligible. A distracted mind is always distracted by something. For a hunter, it was commonly fear, but for Caddock's prey, it was addiction. He walked up to the office floor where Ludwig was talking with 3 Holy Blade hunters. He glanced at him stepping to a desk where he retrieved the documents signed off to Constance. He noted the address and walked to leave. As he did, He glanced over at Ludwig, still within the conversation, but looking at him. Caddock hesitated by the first step, one hand on the stair railing. His face was expressionless, as he did no gesture to Ludwig, yet he still gave him a subtle, disheartening nod before looking back to the talking hunter. He made his way to the old workshop, not far from the new church-established one, where he kept his utilities. He kept it locked, even with the path being obscured and built over. But hunters always found a way into places. He then headed to Constance's second mark of the night. He had some nights prior checked up on her routine as she went out to hunt alone. The first deviation was that she normally hunted in a small group, but had on random occasions chosen to head out on her lonesome. Others had pointed out that she was sloppy alone, and she would agree but argue that she wanted to meet the mettle of the esteemed captain. They forgave her in light of her admitted ambition. Who wouldn't want to become a better hunter? He thought about it as he walked, dressed in his crow feather garb and beaked mask. Thought about her. A ferocious hunter, a good hunter, and prayed that she would be at her mark. He knew she had not always been. He knew she was not getting in over her head. He knew she was indulging. He did not confront her about it, because he had dealt with another of his prey as such once before. It had been denial masking the shame, but it had done nothing. Then when the man was caught in the street, he pleaded, beseeching him as a friend. But drunkenness had transformed him a long time ago into a monster. Not an aggressive one, but a treacherous sort. One that had made an attempt on his life, rather than face what he was becoming. He waited in the shadows of the night, outside of the street lamps, watching the exterior door, praying that she would arrive. The longer he waited, the more he became like a statue. At first he was anxious to see her. His heart had been beating, and he had not wanted to stand still. But the longer he waited, the more he was forced to think. And the thoughts made a void grow in his chest. Then he heard steps coming towards him. It was Constance, holding her bloodied silver sword with a great blade on her back. She was walking quickly to the door of her mark. Before she reached it, he stepped out of the shadows. She did not notice him and continued on. "Constance," he called, interrupting her attempt to knock. She spun around and held the sword at the ready. She did not lower it when she saw him. "Been to a mark, have ya, Hunter?" He did not try to conceal his voice as he calmly walked towards her.
I have.
Slain a beast, have ya?
Yes. It was too late.
He stopped in the middle of the street. She appeared very tense, not lowering her blade.
Perhaps you ought to be more subtle.
Subtle? Not easy to fight beasts subtly. But what would you know?
She started walking out towards him.
Ever thought yourself as the nightmare you are? How can anyone hunt properly knowing there is someone hunting them? Huh?
He remained silent, which seemed to infuriate her as she started to wave with the sword.
Hunt those poor folk instead. Do something before they turn and kill their loved ones.
Calm yourself, Hunter.
Shut up. There's no use hunting calmly. Not when the beasts are like they are. Around every corner. Smelling my blood. Your blood. Who's to say? A hunter of hunter must surely have a desire for blood. That's what I'd say.
She was breathing heavily. She blinked one of her eyes and rubbed it, looking at her fingers once she removed them. A yellowish reflection struck her eyes in the lantern light, like a predator.
Why don't you lay down that sword? Let me check that mark of yours. Is your duty tonight?
Her face became horrified, and she froze. The sword lowering as her arm seemed to become weaker.
Kadok?
Go home, Constance.
She stumbled towards him, a jerky step, then froze again.
You aren't lost. Just go home.
She drew for air faintly, like a gasp.
No,
she whispered, then leapt towards him with a broad slash of the sword. He was already holding the blade of mercy beneath his cape, that he used to strike away the blade. He spun to her left, but she was quick to do the same while plunging the sword into the blade on her back, stepped back and sliced horizontally. He jumped, then darted straight at her like a diving bird with the talons reaching for her. She swept with the broadside to push him, but he had already lunged past her, cutting at her side. She let out a furious grunt, and while stumbling back held the sword with one hand over her shoulder, while pulling up her pistol and firing at him. The sound caused him to instinctively step to the side. She tossed the pistol and jumped at him with a downward strike, screaming in anger while doing so. When the attack missed, he was unable to retaliate due to how she cut upward, then started spinning her entire body while advancing towards him. He stepped further and further back as she finished with a powerful uppercut strike. As her chest was left exposed, and due to how he had leapt aside to avoid it, he kicked from the side into it. She staggered back and plunged the sword so deep into the cobblestone that she was able to break loose the smaller sword, spun around and sliced at him. Having avoided the swipe, he grabbed the arm holding the sword with his left hand, pulled her towards him while he stepped forward, resulting in him ending up right behind her, so their bodies touched. There, he cut her throat while still holding on to her. She struggled in his embrace, only briefly, before she became too weak, and he sat down so her head lay in his lap. There she could see the night sky as she lay dying, and he looked up as well.
You aren't lost, Constance. You'll soar away into a beautiful dream. I promise.
Caddock knocked on the door and took a step back. He quickly saw that someone moved in the window, shortly after which a young blonde woman opened the door, dressed in a very fancy dress.
Good day. My name is Caddock. You must be Lady Ariana.
She examined him up and down, then had a devious smirk come upon her.
Are you a hunter? Retired.
Oh, that makes sense. I don't usually serve hunters. They don't like to admit it, I've come to find.
I was inquiring around Hemwick about a way to access the castle, but it seems difficult these days. I was told you hail from there.
Her smirk vanished, and her shoulders sank a bit. Before she had been inviting and warm, alluring even, but had all that wash off her upon him bringing up the old castle.
Who told you such a preposterous thing?
A former servant, Rudolph.
Her eyes narrowed.
He told you that?
She sounded less like talking about a circulating rumor and more of a secret having been revealed without her consent.
No, I just asked him about the castle. I wanted to use his boat, but he refused to take me. He wouldn't answer my questions, but said that you could.
You...
She opened the door very slightly.
really wanted to go there?
I just want to know who's there. If I'm to be honest with you, my lady, I believe bad people may be hiding at Canehurst. People that kidnap innocent men and women.
The woman took hold around his arm, gently urging him to come inside. She nearly pushed him further in, so she could close the door. He removed his hat, and she was quick to step in front of him, blocking further access.
Don't make yourself comfortable. I have not welcomed you in.
He held the hat in both hands, nodding respectfully.
What did Rudolph tell you?
Nothing more than what I have already told. I wanted to visit the castle, but he appeared terribly frightened. Why, I believe he became so brief with me, so afeard, that he'd laid the task of explaining onto you, my lady. Just to get rid of me, I imagine.
Beyond the hallway he stood in, he could see a cozy lit room further inside. undoubtedly where she served those seeking less churchly communion. He also spotted some ornaments in the house that seemed very costly. Amidst the general clutter, they were few enough to stand out immediately. She crossed her arms and glared at him with her piercing eyes with dark circles around them.
Sir, you ought not to visit forsaken Castle Cainhurst. Naught but ghosts dwell there.
I see.
I was just a girl, but I can imagine why Rudolph, as well as anyone still alive, would not want to speak about it. Those bad people you are talking about are indeed gone. You need not visit, if you just wanted to verify.
Lucaria's men assaulted Cainhurst.
Bad men did. But then again, I was not in a state to recall much.
Ah, I see. It must have been horrible.
It was. But now, let's talk about something nice. As you can imagine, I don't want someone out there with their mouth speaking such lies.
She stepped closer to him and had that initial demeanor return to her as she took a sensitive hold of his hand.
A retired hunter must still get his blood. And I am just the kind of prey for you. No need to talk about Cainhurst when I'm right here, filled with that precious blood that would envy the church.
Her other hand moved to stroke his that she already held. He grabbed it and moved it up to kiss it like a royal.
A hunter shouldn't indulge, even a retired one. And I only seek out secrets, but tend to leave them as such.
She retrieved her hand and crossed her arms with a sneer, but it quickly faded and she relaxed.
People are disappearing, but I assume you already know that. Now, am I right to believe the Cainhurst royals have nothing to do with it?
Her face became even more soft as she searched the floor.
You are. They may once have hunted people. If my mother is to be believed, but none remain to do so. On that I am certain.
Hearing footsteps echoing over the wooden floor coming down the hall, Caddock turned up the brim of his hat and peered in its direction while squinting the restless sleep from his eyes. A man dressed in mostly white entered into the antechamber and was quick to turn his searching expression towards him. Judging by his garb, he was undoubtedly a very upstanding member of the Healing Church's ranks, with his long and formal white robe with large sleeves from which fine black gloves emerged. The vestment collar was so high it looked suffocating, and a light blue ribbon seemed to tie it even tighter. His sharp and immaculate face was clean shaven, with shining slicked back ebony hair. It surprised him a bit, and he could of course also be mistaken about the man's rank, but he found that less likely. The choir was not exactly a public known establishment, and even one such as himself had to piece things together on his own. Seeing them around the workshop, various places of the church, as well as the lack of their presence in specific circumstances, painted him an image of a group that preferred to keep out of people's minds. And they remained largely successful if true, for he had little else to base his theory on, other than that Ludwig referred to them once or twice, and that one of them used to be the vicar of the healing church. Was Ludwig's words the sole reason for why one of them now addressed his inquiry? An extended hand and a nod with perpetually upturned eyebrows gestured him to follow. Caddock arose from his outstretched and slumped position in the chair and found himself to his feet.
Mr. Caddock, a pleasure. I am Mr. Felderworth, here to assist you with any inquiries.
Thanks. He was about to reach out with his hand in greeting, but Felderworth turned sharply and walked back into the corridor.
As I understand it, Mr. Caddock, you are interested in the old castle Canost. Pray tell, what is the source of such curiosity?
There was little presence of genuine curiosity to his tone, making it sound more like he already knew the answer, or was utterly disinterested in it. They entered into a refined library with several dark wooden shelves carved in fine patterns. Several grand portraits hung on the walls of people Caddock had no awareness of. What did provoke his interest was how each of the spiraling staircases leading to the above walkways was sealed with a barred gate, presumably locked.
Well, Master Lugarius was my old mentor. That's why I became a hunter, you see.
Mr. Felderworth spun around and with eyebrows still mockingly upturned, examined him with equally high scrutiny.
Truly? You were one of the church sentinels? No, never got a chance.
Felderworth's chin turned upwards ever so slightly.
Well, as you likely know, we advise against venturing to the castle. It is likely unsafe.
He walked across the room, past a small reading table, and towards a bookshelf along the wall.
And now you want to know the fate of your former master?
He stroked his fingers over the rows of books.
Yes, sir, very much. Does not everyone want to know?
He glanced back at him and drew a volume from the collection and turned fully towards him.
Being acquainted with Master Ludwig, you are aware how some information can be damaging for the common ear, no? Certainly.
He gave him yet another of his demeaning glances, from top to bottom, then sneered curiously.
I suppose Ludwig has the wits to know not to send us the common rabble, despite how mundane their requests might be.
He brushed past him and placed the book gently down on the table surface they had previously passed.
There. What was it specifically you wanted to know?
What became of the man, of course. What fate that befell him.
Kadok joined him by the table. The man suddenly gave him a penetrating stare, like he could see the inner voice within that could speak no lies.
You are a retired hunter, are you not, Kadok?
That I am.
He was satisfied with how well he had disguised how stunned the question had made him.
A hunter, indeed.
He opened the book and searched through the pages.
Master Lugarius led every of his numerous sentinels in a zealous march on the Canehurst castle. Mind you, without the church's blessing.
Examining the pages, Kadok could distinguish phrases that would correlate to what Felderworth was speaking about. But he appeared to have a firmer grasp on the retelling of events without the word's support.
He was unpredictable in those last days, and it is speculated that a seething ire towards them prompted his action. His justification for the debacle is numerous, each more unfounded than the next.
He stopped and peered at him with more intent.
Does this sound like the Lugarius you knew?
He could be quite eccentric, yes. But it all sounds drastic.
Indeed. Suddenly had all the sentinels left their workshop and paraded through the streets one evening. This was 10 years ago.
He finally turned his attention away from him and to the pages.
3 months and 9 days. A march of execution, I believe someone heard him say on departure. Him and his executioners. And that was the last anyone saw of Master Lugarius.
What then? What did he do? And why is Canehurst so silent?
It has long been so. Even before Lugarius decided upon his foolish errand.
But why? Why would it ever get into his head? I mean, what did he think it would accomplish?
Felderworth rolled his eyes.
Well, he accused them of being life-sucking fiends. Vile bloods, as he dubbed them. Bloody spectres in the night, that was as much a scourge on man as the beasts. Also was there accounts of him wanting their assets, and, as suggested by the wrathful fervour with which he made his case, sheer spite was the main aggressor. All sounding very melodramatic. A man too consumed with ideology to let dead things lie. Perhaps he sensed his own power and influence fading. Perhaps it already had, and he made one desperate attempt to immortalize himself.
He slammed the book shut.
Or he had more opportunistic intentions and had formulated an ill-advised coup of sorts.
But why the persecution? If they had already been quiet and solitary, why did he believe them so dangerous?
Lunacy begets the gravest mistakes if given their agency. It is a sad end to your master's tale, but it is regrettably the truth.
No one ever believed him. I mean, did no one ever wonder why the governing royal body suddenly decided to go silent? Sounds rather strange.
And marking them as nightly hunters out for blood makes more sense to you?
Caddock stood silent, pretending to be struck by the truth as the man returned the book.
Has anyone been there?
He finally asked.
At Cainhurst, I mean.
Only once. It is no place you're to visit, curious Caddock. The bridge has long since been destroyed to prohibit such ventures.
You must know then what happened. What the executioners did.
Felderworth let out a composed sigh and raised one eyebrow.
What happened at old Castle Cainhurst would never be condoned by the church, and is nothing short of the product of madness. The accounts would indicate that the measures the executioners employed upon the nobles of Cainhurst rendered that place forsaken beyond human comprehension, far from the graces of gods.
Kirkhammer. A trick weapon typically used by healing church hunters. On the one side, an easily handled silver sword. On the other, a giant, obtuse stone weapon, characterized by a blunt strike and extreme force of impact. The church takes a heavy-handed, merciless stance towards the plague of beasts, an irony not lost upon the wielders of this most symbolic weapon.